Hey, welcome back. Welcome. Happy post Labor Day. I hope everybody has put their white suits away. Aren't you not
Oh,
supposed to wear
that's
white?
right. You're not supposed to wear white anymore.
Yeah, I hope you. I know every week here at church we had people decked out in white suits, and all look like Colonel Sanders.
Now I'm going to wear a beige robe.
Yeah,
from
you gotta
here
wear a
on out.
beige robe from now until Christmas. Anyway, you are watching us on Uniquely Lutheran. We are semi-live, and those of you tuning in to 12, we will be back hopefully on our regular schedule sometime between 10 and 12 every Tuesday. I am your co-host, Al Ernst, along with our other co-host. See, we haven't left yet. Pastor Jeff Gross of New Life Lutheran Church in Sarasota, Florida. And why don't you open us up with a prayer?
Yes. Thank you. Great God, we're grateful that Al and I can be back here again, and we're able to talk to you about the work of the church and the kingdom of God. And we're so grateful for Brian, our producer, who is here with us today, and the ability to come to you wherever you may be. And we ask that you may be blessed, that all may be blessed, and we pray that we can be instruments of that blessing. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, thank you very much, and welcome back as we begin a new chapter of Uniquely Lutheran. But in part of a new chapter sometimes is reviewing our old chapters. As I've mentioned so many times, we started this on just a crazy idea back in, well, that would have been what, 2021? Yep, somewhere early in 2021 as a replacement for the Lenten live church experience during our COVID time. And we have found that due to people coming up to us, as well as how much fun we just have doing the show, that we have so far kind of kept going. And here we are moving into 2023. I mean, I cannot believe we're even beginning to think that. But that comes to my first question before we talk about where I've been and what's been going on is something that another one of these ones that I always wanted to ask a pastor.
Oh my goodness.
Now, all right. Now, my joke on stage is, as well as many other comedians, is that it's Labor Day because the first aisle of every Walgreens has Christmas stuff.
I know.
Yeah. So my question, so my question to you, my friend, is as a pastor and as looking at Christmas from a holy day and as a day of celebration for us as Christians and really just in general the world that even maybe are not Christian. What is your take on all of that kind of stuff that now used to start maybe at Halloween or somewhere else, and now all of a sudden we aren't even down here. We aren't even out of the summer yet, and yet I walk in and I hear Christmas bells ringing on store shelves to buy decorations and things like that.
Well, it's one of my favorite stories I heard is the story of Tim Burton, who was at a drugstore when the Halloween decorations were coming down and the Christmas decorations were going up. And there was this mishmash between spider webs and cobwebs and Christmas lights. And long story short, Nightmare Before Christmas was inspired by that moment.
Wow.
And so we have Nightmare Before 4th of July.
Boy,
we've got a long ways from that period of time. And the thing about it when it comes to holidays, Al, from a Christian point of view, there are a lot of people, and I'm not trying to be cynical, but there are a lot of people that make a lot of money off of Christmas. And it's a time where lots of people benefit from it. And there'll always be a little part of me that doesn't like that. There'll always be a little part of me that thinks that Christmas is at its best when it's celebrated in church. It's at its best when it's celebrated among the family. But I understand, and I'm guilty of sitting on Santa's lap as a little kid. I'm guilty of all kinds of things, playing Christmas music after Thanksgiving, and there's nothing wrong with that. I like the holiday spirit, but I also like the preparation.
Right.
I like a little bit more space between 4th of July and Christmas.
Right. Well,
just a little bit.
I mean, but from a perspective of your people that you shepherd and pastor at a church and everything else, how is it? Do you find yourself getting sucked into that narrative that we've got to do things earlier and earlier and earlier, or do we really work pretty good at trying to follow our own little path that leads us to that holy moment? You know what I mean?
It's a really good question. I heard one of the best advice I ever heard that anybody gave me was pick your battles. Because if you're going to fight all your battles at the same time, you're going to be burned out from the ministry within a year.
Right.
So some pastors choose to pick the battle that Advent is Advent and Christmas is Christmas, and never the twain shall meet. And as I say, go to the mall. The twain have met. And you come to the realization that the only thing where I see that the sneakage, is with a little Christmas music during worship service, during the Advent. And honestly, it doesn't bother me a whole lot. I think we can, it's kind of like it's a big old spoiler alert if we accidentally sing Joy to the World on December 4th.
We kind of know what's going to happen.
Yeah, we kind of know what's going to happen. But I also think it's important, and this is why I like Wednesday evenings, it's important for us to take that time of Advent, as it initially was, is a time for contemplative and growth, a time for sacrifice. It was a time of sacrifice. It was like Lent.
Right.
It was never intended to be sad or dismal or dreary or depressing, but it was most definitely not intended to be jubilant and exuberant and over the top either. It was just that happy ground where you prepare your hearts for the coming of Christ.
Now, is that where then the Advent calendar kind of came in, where you opened the little, I remember as a child, you'd have those things that had the little opening on the cardboard each day. There was
we start the Advent calendar on December 1st, and we put it, and December 25th will be the biggest piece of chocolate. Usually, if you get one of those calendars, and I think that's fine. There's also the Advent wreath, and one of the things with the 4 candles, the 4 weeks leading up to Advent, and we haven't even hit Halloween yet. I actually was at Walmart, and I was a little surprised to see Halloween stuff. And I realized, well, yeah, Christmas stuff's just around the corner.
Yeah, so, well, I can promise you, if you go down here to the CVS on Bee Ridge, the minute you walk in the door, you're hit with one row of Christmas stuff and then a whole bunch of Halloween stuff. So
we never have that problem with Easter, isn't it?
No, we don't.
We don't have anybody sneaking Easter eggs in during Lent.
And the most interesting thing is if you notice that everything comes down from the decoration standpoint from a retail. I believe that they bring in people working overtime on Christmas Day to decorate their stores. But what I noticed, what's on display the day after Christmas is the Valentine's Day stuff.
That's right.
Which is just, to me, now I know they go by money and how much they make, but let me go, we're different rabbit hole. Let me bring another question to you as a pastor, because this is always a controversy, I would call it, within the church, and many churches and people have different ideas about it, which is Halloween. Because with some of our fundamentalist brothers and sisters, they completely just say no Halloween, no nothing, that is worshiping the devil and all those kind of things. And I can tell you, as a kid growing up that celebrated Halloween, I remember it being spooky and creepy, but there was at no time that anybody was putting a pentagram in front of me and telling me that this was all about worshiping the devil. It was more about dressing up and getting candy and things like that.
Well, here's the irony of the word Halloween. The word Halloween actually has Christian origins. All Hallows Eve. It's the day before All Saints Day. And All Saints Day is the 1st of November, and All Hallows Eve is the 31st of October. It was actually a religious holiday. That's why Martin Luther put the 95 Theses on the wall on October 31st. Not because of Halloween. He wouldn't know what Halloween was if somebody snuck up to him with a ghost suit on, because they didn't celebrate it in Germany, or Saxony, I should say. Germany didn't exist. It's really a holiday that came from Scotland and Ireland and Wales, and came to the United States courtesy of people who emigrated from those countries, where they basically took what was once the day between the winter solstice and the fall equinox, the middle point, Halloween, where the veil between life and death is at its thinnest. If you're going to see a ghost any day, it's going to be October 31st. And someone said, we can't have this pagan stuff. Let's turn it into All Saints Day. And so Halloween actually is a Christian word. But I also think, just like a lot of things in life, if you're tasteful, if you understand, you put a Spider-Man costume on a little kid and send him out with a bucket, who's being hurt?
Right.
And so it's just a matter of understanding that it's just a part of our culture. People get to dress up once a year and go out and do trick-or-treating and come back, and the day after Halloween, put all their decorations away and get ready for Thanksgiving.
It's crazy. Well, I kind of like that. I've tried to convince the home family that old Nightmare Before Christmas idea was the best. And I say, get all your decorations out, and now you display them all Christmas and Halloween together, and you just say you're just you're celebrating all of it in one fell swoop. Because to me, what I find is my neighborhood, at least my neighbors, get everything out of their house or just unload massive boxes full of stuff like 10 days before Christmas, and then they have to turn around and the day after New Year's take all that half a day of reloading to restore it somewhere. I mean, if you're gonna put it out, you might as well get some use out of it, I think.
Well, and Brian can probably remember this as a Minnesota guy. We didn't put our Christmas tree up until a little bit into December. And part of the reason is, if we put our Christmas tree up in Thanksgiving with the artificial heat and the dry air, we would have a fire hazard unlike anything you can possibly imagine. By Christmas, first of all, there wouldn't be a needle left on the tree. So we always kept it out on the deck in the snow for a while before we brought it in. It's usually about December 10th or 11th or something.
Wow.
So we were able to really we had winter working in our favor. But the idea, when on the day after Thanksgiving, okay, honey, we need you to go to Lowe's and pick up a tree. It's like, that would never happen up north.
Okay.
he would.
Well, I just find that fascinating, because of growing up in the South. I don't ever remember us actually putting the tree up the day after Thanksgiving, but I would say within the first week of December, we were pulling that. And the funny part on my house, mind you, we've had a lot of things happen in 2021. We had moved all of our massive amounts of Christmas decorations and everything like that. We also have a storage area. Long story short is now we packed everything up and we set it in the garage with every intention of getting it loaded into my little pickup and taking it to the storage area. And we are now on September 13th, and all that stuff from last Christmas is still sitting on the floor of our garage. Now, I am not going to pick that up, take it back to the storage area for a week later to turn around and pick it up and bring it back. So maybe I got out of something on this one, but I find that hysterical. All of our, and it also talks, in my mind, it talks really about how quickly days come and go and how everything just happens in the blink of an eye.
Is a regional glossary to all of our northern watchers. Storage area is what we call basement.
Right. Well, see,
so we all we didn't have to rent a place to store our stuff.
And what and not even to make a political comment here, but the biggest irony I find of the Mar-a-Lago stuff is that they said they went to the basement of Mar-a-Lago to find these items, and I thought to myself, where who has a basement in Florida? I mean, you dig deep whatsoever. You have
it's possible.
I guess so. I mean, I guess when you're that rich, you can make anything happen. But I laugh every time when I hear that they went to a basement in a house in Florida, and I'm like, where? Because usually,
we'll take a little field trip to Palmetto in the historic park. The Carnegie Library has a basement, and to my knowledge, it's the only one in Manatee County.
I'd have to believe that.
And I remember doing a wedding there, and they said, "Okay, you can put on your robe. You just go down to the basement." And it's what? And then someone said, "Well, technically, it's kind of a split level-y thing, but every Carnegie Library has a basement, so we had to put a basement in." So
that's so
it's
funny.
Probably the most humid room known to humankind.
Oh! I mean, you can't even imagine what an underground bunker would look like in Florida in July. I mean, I don't care how much air conditioning you pumped into it; it would just be brutal down there. Well, very good. I appreciate you indulging, because I think our viewers, just like me being a normal guy, of course, we want the deeper meanings, but there are certain things that happen in our world that we run into daily that maybe don't press us as quite, but I always wonder, how would a person of the church, or really of the guidance of our faith, look at some of the other things that are going on in our society and how we respond or handle them. So that
and I also want to just quickly say to those who do take Advent more serious than Christmas and like to see that separation, I totally respect that position. I really do. As a person who has to juggle congregation made up of people from all 50 states, usually, with all 50 different Christmas and Advent traditions, and you're trying to make that middle ground, that's usually where you come into the point where you're making decisions. But I was in a congregation where it was very clear that Advent was Advent and Christmas was Christmas. To be honest with you, I found that to be quite meaningful.
Sure.
I found that to be very meaningful.
Well, and I find it odd that it doesn't matter to anybody else but people who work within the church. Practically, that Advent is technically the new year, is the rollover of the church calendar.
We'll be back to year A. We'll be back to Matthew. Back to Matthew.
Well, you can never get enough.
We'll get into that old Lutheran jargon, or the lectionary jargon.
Yep. And speaking of that, well, a couple of things have happened there.
Tell me about your trip.
Well,
in your journey.
Just been a fascinating couple of weeks. I went out on tour, which is like my first long tour out of state in probably a couple of years. I mean, I might have flown somewhere for a show, but this was where I had 5 or 6 shows in a row and was kind of going, in some ways, reliving the old days in the old car, going from show to show, and then now in the new days, because my industry in the entertainment industry, we used to get booked on tours, and the tours would tell you you're in A city that night, B city this night, C city, and usually now those aren't quite the case anymore. And what you find out is that you kind of have to pick one from column A and another one from column C, and somewhere over here, and somehow you piece together a tour. And to my luck, that God has given me in terms of my church affiliation, many of our fellow Lutherans want shows, and they are in little small hamlet towns in places where shows don't normally come to. So when you bring a comedy show or any kind of event in there, man, they show up in gangbusters. So I had two church shows, one nightclub show, and one country club show during this tour. So I kind of ran the gambit of the entire thing. But my two church shows were obviously the most meaningful church shows I think I have ever done, only because I was taken by surprise by so many people. For those of you that don't know, I worked as what was called a youth staffer in the Lutheran Church in America, and a youth staffer was an assigned young person somewhere in their college years that worked essentially as an intern for the synod of that particular area. And then, as opposed to the kids or the youth or the teens or whatever coming to you, you had a vehicle and you drove to their churches. And many of the youth group leaders would bring you in for the weekend to do a retreat or some kind of group activity. It was a lot of things like that combined in with social activity and everything. And I'm proud to say that I was a part of, and how I wish we still had our youth and teen movement that we had in those days. But I was a part of a pilot program that was completely designed by the secretary, what do they call him, the Secretary for Christian Education, Dr. Bill Mitchum in the South Carolina Synod. It was called LCY, Lutheran Church Youth. It was a way to formalize, I guess you would say, or structure all of these churches in a way that gave the youth leadership. One of the youth sat on the synod board, and also to plan out what we called statewide events as well as service projects. One of the ones that always hits me is that we at our Lutheran camp in South Carolina had a camp for special needs kids, and basically our kids from the church would be one-on-one with these special needs kids for an entire week, and they would
that's wonderful.
Yeah, they would be doing camp activities.
We definitely need to bring that back.
It was
without a doubt.
It was a fantastic time, and that grew to be so big we ended up having to have 2 weeks of that as our time grew. But the LCY became viral now, using today's words, but in yesterday's ideas of mail and phone calls and things like that. And we would have huge attendance at our district, but we divided South Carolina into 4 districts, and we would have district events, we'd have statewide events, and we would also have events that your LCY group in your church had. So needless to say, I was involved with somebody who was a visionary, and I'm the 17-year-old kid watching stuff that had never been done in any other part of the Lutheran Church. And he is Bill is just an amazing reverend, full-fledged, has his doctorate in counseling. His wife, believe it or not, was an assistant to the bishop then in the North Carolina Synod, and she also has her full doctorate degree. So it was Dr. and Dr. Mitchum. And so they are wonderful, wonderful people that I lost contact with. We would trade the Christmas cards during the years. And turns out Bill is 85, Jane is 83. You would look at them and never know that in a million years. As sharp as they were on the day that I met them, and believe it or not, they lived in Lexington, South Carolina. My little show was the Lutheran Church by the Lake in McCormick, South Carolina.
Shout out to Lutheran Church by the Lake.
Yeah, and I hope some of you are watching, and I love you guys. It was just a wonderful day. And in pops Bill and Jane, and obviously surprises me to the point, where it gets very emotional, but then that continues because all the kids, I worked as officers in the LCY, probably 4 out of the 10 kids that were on our statewide committee, their husbands, they popped in. And to say that you've never seen somebody for 40 plus years and suddenly you're there, if you don't believe that there is a God directing how your life is touched and approached, I question that, because this was out of nowhere. Wasn't expecting it, and luckily they laughed, and the show went terrific. But then, of course, we sat around for 2 hours afterwards and traded all crazy stories of all the different silly things that happened to me during my year as a youth staffer, and got to catch up with all these people and find out about their families and what churches they're going to. And here's a factoid we all need to look at from the Lutheran Church standpoint, is that of the 4 kids that were weekly faithful, and I still, are, there is only one of those 4 that attend a church regularly. Not that they switched denominations, not that they became another faith. They still all consider themselves as, and they are the saved by grace. They lead their lives, but they do not attend a church, and so that question also came up.
Yeah, and how old are they?
They're in their 60s. Well, I'm 60. They would be in their mid to late 50s, and most of them have not been affiliated with a church in upwards of 20 plus years. And I said, what is it? Because we were all, you loved it, and what changed and everything like that. And of course, they gave the family all the things and the inconvenient times for their children growing up and everything like that. But what they weren't saying, but what I was hearing was, we lost the ability in the church to serve those people. We kept going on our normal, traditional, this is how it works route, and that is not, we didn't evolve that, and that does not serve those people.
Well, and here's it's a ministry that obviously worked, because they're still Christians, they're still people of faith. They came to see you. They have those, and also just a reminder to some of our northerners, South Carolina Lutherans have been around for 300 years.
There's 150 churches. 150 churches.
And some very well-established, well-respected seminaries,
right,
and colleges that are Lutheran are there, and it's neat to hear how smaller churches pull together to create kind of a bigger church experience, which is probably something we're going to have to do in Florida, where there just aren't a lot of Lutherans and there are even fewer Lutheran kids. Maybe those kind of collaborative efforts can work in keeping them in the church. It really piggybacks, because that's about my generation now. I'm 54 years old, so they're a little bit older. I don't see a whole lot of the people that I knew and loved growing up in the church extremely active in the church, and I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But confirmation is an effort to keep people in the church, was a little less than successful in that endeavor. And so I think we've come to understand what confirmation should be and what it shouldn't be. And we opened up a rabbit's hole that we could fall down. But if somebody could just interview them and say what's going on, or what could we do to bring you back, that would be valuable information.
Well, and I think some of them who have kids that are now heading to college or living on their own and everything like that, I think they are looking. Now they are searching again for a place of belonging. It's just that so many of them had years of, because the traditional family structure has changed. Nothing wrong with that. However, when you have both mom and dad working, you have 2 kids, and let's just put it on the table, at least from a comedian who works nights standpoint. I understand church being at 9:30, 10 o'clock, 10:30 on a Sunday morning, because that's the way it's always been. However, that doesn't seem to serve those needs. I mean, just in the great aspect of me, saying I'll see you at church on this past Sunday, and I lived to that problem in that I called it family fatigue. But after you traveled, you've gotten all your stuff done, everything is crazy. You set your alarm to get up to want to be there in person, and you're physically just not. That does not work for a lot of people.
Right.
And I'm not saying we need to add services or even change the time, but I do think had the churches where some of my kids, those kids I talked to lived, if they had heard there was a Saturday service or a midweek service or a midweek activity or something like that, I would sense they might be much more involved with what was going on. But
well, they had a lot of your program alone tells me that they had a lot of powerful spiritual experiences above and beyond a Sunday morning.
Right.
So if you were to ask them where was the time where you felt closest to God, it might be at a campfire on a Wednesday night.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. And that was a very important experience.
Just like one of the most meaningful times, and we'll wrap here because I would love to get into this in the weeks following on how we can now relook at ways we can serve people, not only the people in need of social and economic and other distress, but also how we can serve our own folks better. I can tell you the first service of the Lutheran Church by the Lake was at 9:30 a.m. Lakeside. It was a beautiful McCormick Lake. It is a gorgeous lake, and the entire service was run outside. We did the traditional service, but everybody brought their lawn chair, like it looked like it was a tailgating for a football game. We all sat down. We had a guitar player. They did and it was wonderful. I mean, it was one of the most spiritually fulfilling times I think I've had in recent times in a church service. Yeah. They then turned around, and their second service was at their building in their traditional building area place, and the people who were there for that fulfilled their need as well. I'm just bringing that question out to all of us as Lutherans, as Christians, as any of our faiths dictate. We want you to be a part of our family.
Absolutely.
How is it then we can structure things, events, activities, and services that help you grow and help us grow that make sense to you, rather than trying to answer the alarm at 7:15 and get kids out of bed and just to make it for a 9 o'clock. So so just as we ponder this in the next few weeks, we ought to talk about some of those things.
Sure.
So very, very quickly, yep, great times, wonderful. We can talk later. The taping for my comedy special in Sarasota was, thanks to Brian, Jeff, all the folks at New Life who showed up, was sold out shows for 2 nights in a row. And the producer told me that we have enough stuff there that he could probably put me on 2 completely different specials with completely different material, which is just a wonderful feeling. It was one of the great show times I have ever had. So appreciate everyone for all that, and we can move forward. I just got a call this morning from a group of churches in the Birmingham, Alabama area who out of nowhere, and who are willing to do that, where I work a church a night for a week kind of thing up there. So obviously we're doing something right somewhere.
That's wonderful, Al.
So
that's great.
So with that, Jeff, I didn't mean to cut you off on anything.
Not at all. It was wonderful to catch up and be back with our friends.
Yep, and we will see you on Sunday, if not live on video. We will be being back for all of our Bible studies and our devotionals back up and rolling. And on behalf of Jeff Gross, you have been watching
Uniquely Lutheran.